are the brand new Apple AirPods Max 2, and despite looking almost identical, or actually identical to the original AirPods Max, these actually have a lot of improvements, from the H2 chip, a new amplifier, new features on here, camera control, and a lot more I'm going to talk about throughout this video. But I'm not going to make this a comparison and only talk about the new things on these headphones. I'm not going to assume that you already have the original AirPods Max. Instead, this is going to be a full comprehensive review. I'll talk about the design, I'll talk about the features, the sound quality, we'll talk about the comfort, we'll talk about the ANC, the transparency, everything else you need to know before buying these headphones. Now, by the way, before we get too far in this video, full disclosure here, this video is not sponsored. Apple's not paying me. Nobody's giving me any money to make this video. I'll talk about both pros and cons in this video. Apple didn't even gift me these headphones. They're letting me borrow them. They sent them ahead of launch so I could try them out. So this is, like I said, going to be a full, very honest review. I'll talk about pros and cons, everything I like, and some things I really don't like about these headphones. So with that being said, I think we should start off with just the design, because that is something that a lot of people are buying these headphones for. They aesthetically have become very well accepted, and people wearing these walk around Brooklyn, walk around LA, anywhere. You'll see these headphones absolutely everywhere. And part of it's because they're a premium pair of headphones, and they're kind of a style statement. Now, there are 5 different colors with these. We've got the blue ones right here. I'll link the other ones down below. Actually, I'll show them on screen as well, but a lot of different options for aesthetics here. And the ear cups are magnetically removable, which is not only helpful if you wanted to change the color and have a different ear cup versus the rest of the headphone, but I find also very beneficial if you're wearing these in the gym or anywhere, like if you just wear them a lot and these wear out, it's nice to be able to replace them very, very easily, or take them off and clean them and then put them back on without worrying about, I don't know, the rest of your headphones. The design, I said, is also very premium because you can see you've got this kind of matte aluminum finish that's very similar to a MacBook Pro, for example, kind of consistent with the rest of Apple's lineup. The headband is a nice solid metal, but at the same time, flexible, able to be bent, and just feels nice and sturdy, not like a piece of plastic, but it's covered in like a soft kind of silicone material that again makes it more comfortable. On the top, you have this mesh that distributes the weight across your head when you're wearing these, and as far as controls go, you've got the rotating crown, which is similar to the Apple Watch. You can turn it and that adjusts the volume very intuitively. You wear it and your right thumb is going to be controlling that, or your right pointer finger, and you can press that as well to change, playback, play, pause, next song, previous song, things like that, or you could press and hold it as well. And the other button is going to be your sound control, toggling between ANC and transparency. But what these do not have is a power button. Look around them, you'll see there's no way to turn them on. You don't press and hold the top buttons, they just turn on. And that's kind of Apple's goal, to make these feel like magic. They just work. All you do is you take them out of the case, as Apple calls it, the smart case, and really the way this works is there's a small magnet in the middle here that, when placed between the 2 ear cups, puts it into a deep sleep mode. So these technically never turn off. They're always kind of alert of what they're doing. So if you take them out of the case, it'll turn them back into full power mode, and you put them on your head and they turn on. It happens fairly quickly, and 95% of the time it works perfectly. But 5% of the time, I find that I'm taking these off, putting them back in the case, and then putting them back on my head again, just to retry that cycle to get them to turn on. So my first complaint is that I do wish there was a way to turn these off or on by, pressing and holding, or some combination of the buttons. I think there's enough controls there that probably could happen, but Apple doesn't give us that capability. Talking about the case then, this is a complaint that a lot of people have. I don't mind it nearly as much as other people, but the case only covers the ear cups. So this is going to be, it's lightweight, it's somewhat protective of the ear cups. You can charge it while it's in the case, that's a positive there, and you can hang it up on a wall if you wanted to. But if you're doing that, you may find that the mesh on the top could eventually wear out from having a little nail right there. I have a headphone hanger, and I've been using my previous generation AirPods Max on that for a while, and as you can see, they haven't worn out at all. But my first generation from whatever that was, 4 years ago, definitely is a little bit wrinkly in that mesh on the top. And the mesh is not nearly as easily replaced as the ear cups. In fact, I don't even know if you could replace that. But talking about the case then a little bit more, if you don't like this case, so a lot of people don't like this if they're traveling, they want to throw something in their backpack, and they don't want to have to worry about this getting damaged by other things in their backpack. I actually did find a really good solution to this. If you go online, I actually have a link down below, and it is just this case that is it's expensive. It's like $100, but it's a nice premium leather case, allows you to store charging cables in there as well. And it is actually a smart case, so it has a little magnet that goes between the headphone cups, and it will turn it on and off just like these do. If you buy a cheap one on Amazon, it's very likely not going to do that. And if you don't have this going into ultra low power mode, it'll still go into a lower power mode, and then I think it's like 72 hours until it goes into the ultra low mode. I could be wrong on this, but you're going to be losing your battery a little bit faster with some of those cheaper cases. Some of the cases even have, like, you put it in the smart case and then put it in another case, and that solves the protection problem, but it, extra steps that I'm not really interested in having. Also, looking at the design, you see on the bottom, we have a USB Type-C port. That's for charging. You get 20 hours of battery on these. Not really the longest in the industry. In fact, many in the industry are up to like 50 or 40 hours per charge. So that's a little bit of a downside here. But I do appreciate that the USB Type-C port can be used for lossless audio through the wired connection. So I have these hanging next to my laptop all the time. I usually plug them in, but if I ever forget and I have a call, I put them on and I'm like, oh no, the battery's dead. I could just plug into my laptop, it'll charge them, I'll be able to use it, but you're also able to get higher quality audio when you do that. A port that is unfortunately missing, in my opinion, is the 3.5mm port. I find that although you can have an adapter that goes from USB to 3.5mm, sometimes I just like having, cables that are like, I don't need to have that dongle with some other headphones. They just have a 3.5mm port on them, and these don't have that. As far as fit and comfort go with these, you'll see you can bend them quite far, and it is quite sturdy. So not only does it bend, also you can adjust by that really premium smooth metal slider there with the polished metal bar underneath. Again, looks premium, but also is one of the most well executed, in my opinion, for size adjustments. And they bend with a magnetic snap, so a magnetic bias to come back in, but they bend out at an angle there, and then you can also flex it. So it fits a variety of head sizes and shapes quite well. However, the biggest drawback for these, although, I think they're very comfortable, and if you wear them for, up to like an hour, absolutely no problem. My ears don't particularly get hot with these. I like the way they feel and fit, but the weight of them is going to be the biggest drawback in that aspect, especially if you plan on wearing these for workouts. And speaking of working out with these, they technically don't have a water resistance rating, but most headphones actually don't. You look at the best from Sony, Bose, so many other ones out there that are premium, even similar in price to this, do not have a water resistance rating. So although that may be viewed as a downside, it's actually very common in the industry, and a lot of people still wear these while they're running, or if they're in the rain, if they're sweaty, whatever, and they seem to hold up pretty well. You can leave a comment if you've gotten these wet and had damage, but I haven't personally heard of anyone that had a problem with that. So technically, these still could work just fine for working out. I'll talk about other use cases later in the video and who I think these are really best for, but let's talk a little bit more about the active noise cancellation. One of the biggest reasons to get these headphones. There's a lot that these do incredibly well. ANC, without a doubt, is one of them. And the ANC now has been significantly improved versus the previous generation. So even though, like I said, these are indistinguishable in design, the previous generation and the Max 2, the ANC is going to be your biggest difference. And the reason for that is because we now have the H2 chip versus the H1 chip on the inside. We're going to get many features with that, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the ANC is claimed to be, I think, like 1.5 times stronger. Based on my testing, that is 100% a huge improvement between these two headphones. So I just did a basic test where I played some white noise, set distance away, turned it up until the headphones were no longer able to block it. The previous generation was blocking a very impressive 61 decibels until it really wasn't sufficient anymore. The new generation was blocking about 65.5 decibels. And remember, decibels are a log scale, so that difference is absolutely huge. If I was traveling with these would do an excellent job, among the best in the industry actually, when blocking out those lower droning sounds. And if you want to know how these compare to the best of Bose and Sony and Sennheiser, I am working on a big comparison. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see that video. But the other test of ANC, so low noises are not everything. Some ANC models really struggle to block higher frequencies. So when blocking out voices, I find that, again, you do have a very significant improvement in the newer model here. I was blocking about 38 decibels on the original ones, or the previous generation, which is like the 1.5 one. It was the USB Type-C Airpods Max from like 2 years ago. The new ones, I was blocking about 44 decibels, so a very significant jump in that as well. So the active noise cancellation on the AirPods Max 2 is absolutely incredible. A huge step up, and one of the biggest reasons people would buy these headphones. The transparency, honestly, is not really that changed in my experience, but it didn't need to be changed. The previous generation was already pretty much the industry gold standard. The transparency is very, very accurate. There's no white noise. You can put them on your head and take them off, and it's almost indistinguishable. You can hear everything around you, and like if I wanted to listen to music and I had these on and they weren't connected, I could still enjoy music from a speaker a couple feet away. And that kind of brings me into sound quality. Now, the sound quality on these has been improved for several reasons. So these now have Bluetooth 5.3 versus 5.0 on the previous ones. They also have a new amplifier, the same amplifier as the AirPods Pro 3, so you have lower THD and signal noise. And of course, much like last generation, you're still able to get that lossless audio if you're going with a USB-C cable. But as far as Bluetooth goes, these only have SBC and AAC, which many people are going to look at that and say, oh, I want higher res codecs. And yes, I would absolutely love higher resolution codecs, but these actually still sound really, really good. So these have an adaptive EQ. There's no EQ in the app. There's no actual app at all. I'll show you what you're able to adjust on the phone, but you know, the sound you get is the sound you get. However, there's powerful bass, very well controlled though. It's not overdone like so many other headphones. There's plenty of details on the highs. Overall, a very neutral profile, much like a lot of the other AirPods products, that makes them really versatile. Although some casual listeners who prefer the V-shape, the boost in the bass, the boost in the trebles, they might find these a little bit boring. I personally am a big fan of these. I think the sound profile on the AirPods Max is very well done. It's really hard to complain about these. And like I said, between the new amplifier and the addition of the H2 chip, these are getting some audio improvements compared to the first generation.
So let's get into a microphone test. These are the AirPods Max 2, and I'm using the microphone through the camera app on my iPhone Air, but the microphone is directly through the AirPods Max. So it's able to use these, presumably if you wanted to record a video and your phone was really far away, like, yeah, these can act as a microphone. But this would also be an example of probably the best case scenario. I'm in a studio environment right now, so let's go outside. I'll get on a phone call. We'll see how well it's able to block the sound around me. And I mean, AirPods Max in the past, actually all AirPods, have done an excellent job with microphones. So I would not be surprised if these also did an excellent job. In fact, I expect them to. So I'm outside. It's really bright out, obviously, but busy road. There's definitely a breeze right now. You can see some cars going behind me. This is just like a Google Meet call using the AirPods Max 2 on my iPhone. Definitely a tough environment, but let me know if this is able to block out the sounds around me and how well you're able to hear me, if at all.
And of course, the price of these. Now, people are going to be putting headlines everywhere. Same ridiculous price, expensive, blah, blah, blah. Like, people are going to complain about these. And yes, they are absolutely not cheap headphones, but this is very interesting, and this has actually changed versus when they were first launched back in 2020. So a $2020 is not the same as a $2026. So according to BLS.gov, I checked this. If you look at $549 in December of 2020, what is that equivalent to in today's dollars? It's actually $689, which means that if you're using the same currency from then to now, and this is a little bit more getting into economics here, the new ones are actually cheaper than how the original ones were launched. They're $140 cheaper because $549 today is less valuable than $549 in 2020. So Apple is giving us the same design, a lot of improvements, but technically they're lowering the price in the actual value of dollars. I'm sure there's gonna be comments from people who don't understand what I mean by that, so if you do understand, go on down, check out the comments, and maybe help explain it to some other people. So I mentioned that these don't actually have an app, but on your iPhone, you're still able to change a lot of settings. So let's see what settings are available on the AirPods Max 2. If you go into your settings and you tap on AirPods Max 2 once they're connected, you'll see we have transparency and noise cancellation. There's also adaptive ANC, which is going to change based on the environment you're in. So if you go outside, it gets louder, it's going to adjust the volume. It works really seamlessly, and some people try this and they're like, it doesn't even work, but it actually works so well, you don't even realize what it's doing. There's also a volume limiter on transparency, so if you're wearing these and something really loud happens, that's not going to be reproduced in the headphones into your ears, which is kind of a nice safety feature there and makes it a lot more comfortable. Scrolling down, you can see you're able to answer calls and change the controls for, how you're pressing the buttons to do stuff like that. Camera remote, I can turn that on, so you can press it once or press and hold to take photos and start videos. When I first heard about it, I was like, this sounds really useless. I don't want to be wearing the headphones in photos and looking like, in my photos. But if you do, maybe like if you're in the gym or whatever, some people might be using that. But I wanted to know, how does it work? Like, can you actually take the headphones off when you take a photo? So let's actually see that right now. If I press the camera control button, I'll go into photo. First of all, with it on, let me turn it around, get a photo of me here. I can press it. I'll press the crown, and it does a timer, 3, 2, 1. And it takes a photo. Okay, so that worked pretty well. But let's see if I can take the headphones off and if it'll still work. So if I'm holding it over here and I press the crown once, it does still work. So if you were in a group photo, you could technically like hold these behind your back, I suppose, and take a group photo, assuming you don't have like an Apple Watch or something else. There are other ways you could achieve this, but okay, that's actually kind of a useful feature if you, again, have these and are taking a group photo and you just hold them behind your back. Okay, so what else do we have here? We have personalized volume. So based on, it's going to adjust the volume. I don't usually leave that on, but conversation awareness is a really big one and is especially useful on these headphones. So if you're on a train or something, rather than like always taking these off your head, like you can't just take one earbud out as you would with AirPods. These, you can just talk and it'll turn the volume down, turn on transparency. It identifies that you're speaking. You can have a conversation with somebody, and when you're done talking, after a while, it'll just turn your music back up and turn on the ANC. And the longer your conversation is, the longer it waits before resuming your music. So that's a feature that is very well executed by Apple, in my opinion. We've got adaptive audio there, so you can customize the volume. Loud sound reduction, like I said, that's a transparency mode thing. I really appreciate that, and I always leave that on. And we've got some other, 360 audio, spatial audio is what they call that. I'm not a big user of that, but it does exist if you wanted to use it. I'm actually going to go and disable that right now on this new one with this phone, so stop using it. I just personally don't find it. It's not something I use. But there's also Live Translate on here. So Live Translate came out with the AirPods Pro 3. People were very excited about that. People are now excited about these having Live Translate as well. So the way it works, if I just go into Translate, technically it's in beta right now, but you download the language you want to use. So if I'm like, all right, I'm traveling to Japan, I can download the language. So all you do is you press and hold the listening mode button. That's the kind of rectangular shaped button, the long pill shaped button, and that'll open up Live Translate. I demonstrated this with my original AirPods Pro 3 review, and I found that it's definitely improving a lot. Live Translate, it really requires a lot of compute, and it's definitely not perfect. It's not going to get every word correct, but I found that it worked reasonably well. I could hear the voice, and I also heard like the basically Siri kind of voice talking in my native language and translating for me. So yeah, it's kind of impressive. It's something that you could probably already achieve with some other apps out there, perhaps even with better quality, but I don't know. The feature exists. We also now get head gestures on the AirPods Max 2, so you can nod or shake your head to answer or reject phone calls and notifications from Siri. And you can talk to Siri by either saying, "Hey Siri," or just Siri. There's some accessibility things over here. Apple does a really good job, in my opinion, of being accommodating to people with different needs with accessibility. But otherwise, those are the settings on the AirPods Max. Now let's talk about pros and cons of these headphones, kind of rounding it off. Pros. These have excellent sound quality. These have excellent ANC. These have excellent transparency. These are deeply integrated into the Apple ecosystem. Those 4 reasons there are going to make these, that's probably most of the reason anybody would buy these. And that checks all the boxes that make them an excellent pair of headphones, in my opinion. But not everything is going to be perfect on them. And before getting into the cons, talking about some neutral things, I'm kind of neutral on the price. It's definitely expensive. People will complain about it, but they are very premium headphones. And like I said, technically the price is lower in real dollars than it was just a couple years ago. However, if you look at other premium headphones on the market, the Sony X Mark 6s, $460. Bose Quiet Comfort Ultra 2, $450. Sennheiser 630s, $500. So yeah, these are still pricier, but the gap is getting smaller. Now getting into the negatives. They are very heavy headphones. They don't really have a case that protects them entirely. You could buy a third-party one, but that's an extra $100. There's no on or off button, and there is still no EQ. Also, they really only work on Apple. You can put them in pairing mode and connect them to a non-Apple device, but you won't be able to change any settings. You won't be able to get any updates on these. They won't have the seamless switching between, all the Apple devices as you do. So compatibility is really quite limited to the Apple ecosystem. But I still think if you're deep in the Apple ecosystem and you have a budget that can afford these headphones, you will probably really like them. They're excellent performing headphones, and there's a lot that Apple really did right. And even though, like I said, these are indistinguishable aesthetically from the previous generation, they really do have some pretty measurable improvements. So let me know what you think about these in the comments down below. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm sure there's gonna be a ton of comments that are like super pro or super anti-Apple. Flame wars are definitely gonna happen in the comments, but I'll see you down there.